All right. I really want to thank each and every one of you for taking the time out of your busy schedules to attend today's webinar, Composition for Family Portraits. My name is Kevin Casey, and I'm a product and workflow consultant here at collages.net, and we'll be hosting the webinar today along with a very special guest of ours, Don MacGregor. Don is located in Vancouver, Canada, and is also going to be explaining exactly what we need to do to create the composition for all of your family portraits. So thank you so much for joining us today, Don. How are you doing today?
110%. Looking really forward to sharing a little bit of my enthusiasm with you all.
All right. Awesome, Don. We're glad to have you on board here. So we are just going to get into a few basics on the webinar software. As you'll see in the upper right-hand corner, there's a small window that looks just like this. This is part of the webinar program. If at any time you need to maximize or minimize this window, you simply want to click the orange arrow found right here, and that will allow you to maximize or minimize this window. At any time during the webinar, if you do have any questions, please feel free to use the chat feature located right down here in the questions box, and I will be filtering through and saving some questions for Don towards the end of the webinar. And if you have any questions, please feel free to use the chat field as well. And without further ado, I'm going to pass it on over to Don.
Okay. I've got to say show my screen. And I think we are ready to go. I'm just going to
Looks good.
Except for one thing, and that means I've got to take this screen over here and put it over there because that one's in the way. And now I think we're set to go now. Does that look proper on the screen?
Yes, looks great.
Okay, great. First, let me say thank you to everybody for taking their time with this morning. And I also want to say thank you to Kevin and Collages. Collages is a great lab. I mean, all labs today have a very similar product. They've all got great technology. So what has to set them apart is their service and their customer service. And I can say with absolute enthusiasm and honesty that the customer service that I get when I phone Collages, and has nothing to do with the fact that I'm doing workshops for them. You know, they don't know me from hole around with the rest of the people, but it's great. It simply is outstanding, and that does set a company apart. Today, what I want to do is walk through my enthusiasm and passion for family photography. I'm going to break the workshop down into sort of two modules. The first module is going to be a little bit more about attitude and how to sell the portraits, how to build a sales process for family photography. And then the second module is going to be more about the artistic side of things, where we can talk about the actual composition elements and the relationship of people within an image. So without any further ado, let's start working into things. Today we face a huge, huge challenge in our work. We've been hammered by digital overhead. Clients think that they are the pros because they are using the same equipment that we are using. We as photographers have struggled to embrace digital and to create a brand new workflow compared to our old optical days and wet days. The other area that is a big problem for all of us, especially the emerging photographers, is what they're going to charge. Photographers tend to base their prices these days on their own comfort zone, and they don't realize that what we do in creating, in particular, family photographs, as our focus today, is worth a great deal more. It is not based on the cost of an 8x10 print or a 30x40 canvas from a service provider like Collages. It's based on our artistic skills, our craft that go into making a photograph. And that is a real big issue. I want you to remember this comment. If nothing else today, remember this particular comment. Is the price too high, or the purchasing desire not high enough? I don't think that there is a more powerful statement that can be made today. And this relates totally to your belief in the value of what we do. Ernest Hemingway, prolific writer, amazing, amazing writer. Now, he probably wrote all those amazing books either by hand on a piece of paper and rewrote it and rewrote it and rewrote it, or maybe an old Remington typewriter with two fingers going bang, bang, bang. Yet his books will live on for centuries. Today, you and I all have equipment that far, far surpasses anything that Hemingway ever could have even conceived. Yet we don't consider ourselves authors. Where is the difference as it compares to us as photographers? Today, a lot of the people think about the equipment as the the real measure of a professional photographer, and it is not. So we come back to this comment, is the price too high or the purchasing desire not high enough? When you want something bad enough, you will go to your way to find a way to buy it. It doesn't matter if your credit card's a little bit maxed out. If you want that pair of shoes that you saw in the mall, or that purse, or that new putter in the sporting goods store, you find a way to buy it because you know it's going to give you some sort of gratification. That is our goal with our portrait photographs. We have got to create photographs that have intense purchasing desire such that our clients don't argue about price. They don't turn around and say, can we nickel and dime, or how come you charge too much? They must have that because it might tell a story or an emotional value to them. Now, one of the ways that I do that in my portrait work here at home, and it's not related directly to this workshop, but it is by creating what we call emotional symbolism in our portraits. Emotional symbolism could be things like special places and special activities. That's two of the simple contributions. When you create a portrait in an environment that has a significant emotional value to them, perhaps their home or their backyard or their garden or somewhere where they go on holidays, or a wedding couple where they got engaged, that visual setting is going to have a value to those people. The same can be said for activities in fine portraits. If you're creating a portrait that's got an activity that relates strongly to the family, it will create stronger purchasing desire. So keep that comment in mind. Is the price too high or the purchasing desire not high enough? Family portraits, I strongly believe that it is the most lucrative and most rewarding emotionally and financially in today's photography world. Weddings, I photographed weddings for a very, very long time, and I photographed probably 4,000, 3,000 weddings over my career, and I still love them. But you work awfully, awfully hard for those, and you put in an unbelievable number of hours to get a return on that. High school senior photography is great, and you can get up into a pretty decent average with high school seniors. But again, there's a lot of time involved, whereas with family photographs, not only is it emotionally really rewarding to create portraits for families, but it is highly, highly lucrative. Successful family portrait, however, must follow a process, and I mean this with absolute clarity. In the United States and here in Canada, the average sale for family portraiture, from my little mini surveys I've been doing and talking to people, is probably anywhere from $500 to $700. That's not an unrealistic average. Yet the real leading photographers that focus on a process of creating and selling their family portraits will see revenue up in the several $1,000s, $2,000, $3,000, $4,000 on an average for a family sale. Now, I don't mean that for a family sale that here's a newlywed couple and they just had a baby and they just bought a car and they just bought a house and the mom isn't working. I'm talking about a family that is an evolving family where the children are starting to grow up, or they're starting to get into their teens, that sort of thing, and the family has a career income from the parents. Those are the sessions that you will clearly see, or you can see, into the multi-$1,000s. And there are some people that will get sales up into the $5,000 and $10,000 or even more for the family work. But you must follow this process. So let's look at the beginning of that process. Client education is really what it's all about. You need to educate your client as to what they can invest in. Most families and couples, parents, etc., don't know what a gallery wrap canvas is. They don't know what 40 or 50-inch canvas hanging in their home can do for them. They don't know they can even have it done. They base their decisions on their school day photography or their high school senior photography experience. So the consultation is the first part of the process when you are spending some time with your client, talking about where you want to make the portrait, the clothing, the emotional values, and so forth. That's where you start to plant the seeds and water the seeds of how they can enjoy the process. The consultation process is not just about what to wear and where to make the photograph. It's establishing with the client what they can do with their portrait. Perfect example, I was in a home 2 weeks ago, did the session this past Saturday, and I went through the clothing and the setting and the designing and things, chatting with the mother and father in their living room. And then upon the clothing, I said, Mrs. X, said, one of the things I wanted to talk to you about too, and I warned you about this in the phone, I didn't say warn, is I want to talk about how you might want to enjoy your portrait. So if you want to take a couple minutes and show me some areas in your home, excuse me, that might be appropriate to hang your portrait, that way you can have some thoughts and some background information so that you can make a good decision when it comes time to make a decision. And we wandered around the home, and the mom said, well, I was thinking of hanging it above the fireplace. And I literally took out a tape measure and I measured the fireplace, and I said, I'm going to make a note that should this be the area that you end up hanging your portrait in, I'll have a note of the appropriate size so I can project that size for you when it comes time to choosing. I wanted them to start thinking about it. On my little list up in here, it says consultation. Obviously, I've mentioned that. Displays that support home installations. Whenever I have a family portrait more than about 30 inches, and I try and do it smaller as well, I install it in the client's home. I'll drive it over there. I will hang it. I will move it, whatever lighting I have to do. I want that display to be a very, very powerful part of their home furnishings or their home decor. As soon as I'm done, though, I immediately pull up my iPhone or my little pocket camera that I've taken with me, and I make a photograph of that complete installation of the home so that I can share with other clients what people are doing. I just hung a portrait in the in-home last Friday morning. It was a 50-inch, and I didn't have my camera with me or my iPhone. It was in the car. And Ms. Yen comes up with her iPad, too, with a camera and said, Don, can this work? So I was using the client's iPad to make a photograph of the installation and immediately email it to me here at the studio. And it's a great way of showing the clients that people do it and how powerful it can look. You also need to have some samples that support your artistic vision of your imaging. To me, good portrait sales like this start with gathering information from a client, searching questions and so forth, and once you start to get some information about the session you are planning on, then you start to build your artistic vision and convey that vision to your clients. Now, the artistic vision can be your environmental portraits. There's lots of space. It could be something done in a home. It could be a relationship walking, talking image. It could be an image of the family, on their water ski boat, ready to go things, or perhaps fly fishing. I've got a great friend down in Texas that is teaching her boys how to fly fish. And, that's a great opportunity to do a portrait of them, mom teaching the kids how to get in the water and do fly fishing. You want to also show samples to inspire the classic and relationship style of imaging, and we will get into that down the road here a little bit. Another key thing you want to do is samples to support wall decor size. This has been said over and over and over again by good speakers that you will only sell that which you show your client you have for sale. In my studio here, and I'll show you a couple of photographs in a bit here, I do not have anything smaller than a 40-inch image on the walls, period. And don't be afraid of doing that. Some of the clients can turn around and say, well, can't we just get something a little bit, to put on our desk? Of course you can, Mrs. Jones. But if you set the standard as 5x7s and 8x10s, that's what the client's going to invest in. If you set the standard as 30, 40, or 50-inch images, your clients will invest in those sizes of portraits. Another key thing is to support the samples of unique finishes, canvases, or fine art images. Virtually everything we do here in the studio is canvas, gallery wrap canvases, or classic canvases, classically framed. And that's all I show. I do have one or two fine art images, like on the fine art photographic style of papers, but 99% of everything I have in the studio here is canvas, and that's what I sell. The next thing on our little list here is the sales process. The clients must understand the value of projection, and the clients must understand the value of your input. Now, there's two journeys here to consider. One of them is that a lot of sales today, and photography sales, are done online. And by the way, Collages does have a wonderful system for doing their online presentations. It's smooth, it's easy, the image quality of ordering online really is, I gotta say, it's great. I use it for my wedding work. But when you get into portrait sales for families in particular, where you are asking them to invest in more than just a few $100s, you do need to go into a process of projection where there's a one-on-one relationship between you and that client during the sales presentation. Projection is a very, very powerful tool, and Kevin and I have talked, by the way, of doing something along these lines as a workshop down the road here a little bit. The clients must also understand the value of your input. When you let other people that are not trained properly in photography sell your imaging, you are doing a disservice to your clients. In the years when we used paper proofs, people would take their paper proofs home and they start arguing, talking about which one's the better one, and Uncle Bill would come in that has an expensive camera and say, no, this one's too dark, this one's too light, they're no good. And yet you as a professional know that that's okay, that's just been printed down a little bit too dark, or that just needs to be printed a little bit darker. You know that you can do the retouching. You know that you can do that enhancement. You know that you can do those kinds of things that clients don't. So it's really important that you, as the photographer or your representative that has the knowledge, be involved in the sales presentation so that they can get the maximum understanding of what they're investing in. There's many opportunities to enhance the sales process. I could go on forever on a Sunday about first impressions. They are immensely powerful. The first impression is a lasting impression. There's no second chance for a quality first impression. And first impressions come in so many areas. Your telephone manners, that's huge. When you phone a company for service and you hear, Joe's Pool or Mate Ball speaking, or they get a mumbled, name of a business without even a name attached to it, you're not so confident to work with them. However, when you walk into a lawyer's office and you've got these beautiful hardwood floors and these bookcases with leather-bound books, and the receptionist is dressed immaculately, and greets you enthusiastically and professionally and so forth, your first impression is, these people are good, these people are expensive, but you're also thinking at the same time that these people are good. They're going to do the job I need done. Well, we as photographers need to create that first impression as well. We do not want to set the standard that wearing jeans and we're cheap kind of a service. We need to express to them that we are a professional, and it can be done by our first impression visually. Our samples that we have in our studio, or if you're an in-home studio that you take out to clients' homes, they need to be top shelf. They need to be clean and well framed and great color. Your sample albums, they cannot be dinged up. You've got to show them that we respect what we do and we command compensation for it. Direct mail and newsletters is something that I think that's going to return. Right now, there is a huge effort for blogs and for email marketing, and I think it's getting to a point now where a lot of people are getting a little discouraged by it, and they're just hitting that delete button so fast it's not funny. So in my personal business here, we are going to be moving back to a direct mail piece, doing a newsletter to our existing client base that showcases what we're doing. That I just did a workshop in, Estes Park, which I did this past week, and I was involved in something down there, and or a new session for a family that we did that's got a wonderful story onto it. So we're going to go back to that, and I think people will stop and read it, and that's going to go out to our existing client base. Malls and home shows, powerful opportunities for first impressions and to showcase what you do. Malls can be expensive in big cities. There's a lot of rules that come into play with it, but they are a great opportunity to showcase what you do in terms of lifestyle portraiture. I mentioned telephone is huge. You've got to have great manners. Your consultation process is another very good opportunity to build the foundation or to pre-frame the sale. Another area, odd enough, is the actual session. I did this past weekend, or 2 weekends I guess it was. They were originally interested in just something more modest size. It was a gift for grandma, blah, blah, blah. And I kept working on them, letting them know what they could invest in terms of a wall decor portrait. And they were kind of like, no, I think we're just looking for something more, in a modest size. And I did do a couple of images on that session that had a lot of space in them that were really beautiful, showing off the West Coast here. And I turned around to the mom partway through the session, said, Mrs. Jones, so the images we did here are very stunning. And I know that you weren't interested in a wall decor portrait, but should you elect to go down that road, this is the image that will really resonate well with you. I was just building up the, using words to build up the interest for the possibility of something to hang on their wall. I did the same thing with the contact for presentation. I phoned the binders that I photographed last night before I left the studio, and I got a hold of Marvin. I said, Marvin, it's Don calling from the studio. I just wanted to let you know that we hit a home run. I'm just so thrilled with the images. And I was being honest, because I'm really happy with the session. I said it was great, and your mother-in-law, who didn't want to be in the photograph, she looks fantastic. She was laughing with the grandchildren. And he said, he just got all enthusiastic. He said, well, when can we come in? When can we come in? I'd let them know that we have something that's great. The presentation, how you actually present your photographs, be it through a projection process like ProSelect or whatever, powerful opportunities. And of course the website and the blog is another good opportunity. Think like a customer. Are your clients wowed with your images, your website, your telephone manners, your enthusiasm, and your passion? These kind of first impressions, I just can't stress enough how important they are as you talk about your work. I'll give you a couple examples of my studio. We had a studio on a street called Dunbar Studio. It's an old house with a storefront area in front of it for almost 30 years, or actually pretty close to 30 years. And 5-6 years ago, we moved down into it's actually technically a warehouse. On the right-hand side of the upper photograph is actually a garage door with glass, garage door. But we finished it off inside, so I think it looks pretty nice. But you can see that we display our work with a lot of respect and pride. 40, 50-inch images is all that we have all the way down those hallways. The lower image is just a long gallery style hallway. This is the other image I want to show, and this is our sales room. The only difference now, as compared to when I made these photographs, is that we have an area rug that's about 2/3 the size that covers the floor, and it just helps with the sound because that hardwood floor is very, very hollow sounding. But we showcase all our work. They're individually lit. The image on the lower right, you can see the couches that are there. That's where I want the clients to sit, and of course the projection on the far wall. That's by design. I do not want those clients going up to that screen and dusting that image or looking intently close at it. I need them to look at that image from an average viewing distance as it might relate to their home, so they can embrace size and the expressions of people and the head size that goes on within the photographs. Very carefully designed. Testimonials are a very, very powerful way of building the desire for purchasing their portraits. Testimonials can also be very much like those images I make when I go into clients' homes. I'll show you one here in a second. It basically says that people do invest in wall decor. We have an album in the front of our studio here, which is a wonderful letters. Now we get emails, unfortunately, that is just the testimonials that people send us and say, Don, we love our portrait. It's everything we dreamed of. And I make sure people have the opportunity to see that when they come into the studio. Here's an example of an installation that we did. That's a 50-inch image hanging in their home. Many of our clients look at this and go, wow, is that one of those big 16 by 20s? No, that's a 50-inch image because it relates. It's the right size for that fireplace area. Anything smaller, it wouldn't look right visually to that area. I want to talk briefly here. Actually, I'd love to go on this for hours because this is a cool thing. Master image. Many years ago, when we're sitting around in the conventions and things and talking about our portrait work, we'd be saying that wouldn't it be cool if our clients did what the old painters had the opportunities to do? If they just came into us and gave us their credit card and said, make our family photograph, charge us whatever you need to charge us, make it whatever size you think is right, do whatever you think is the appropriate thing to do. And yet we as a photography industry led people into having proofs to choose from and giving them so much opportunity. And please keep in mind, I'm talking about family photography now, not high school seniors or children. I mean, those I do strongly believe you do have to show a lot of variety because there's opportunity to sell albums and things that go along with it. I'm talking specifically right now about family photography. Today at our studio here, we literally do what we used to talk about in the bar. We make a master image of our family photographs. And it started a few years back. I had a session that was just a horrible session in terms of the children. I had one of the younger kids that couldn't have been any more than like 5 years old using the 4-letter word in front of her parents and grandparents, or his parents and grandparents. It was just a real tough session. And I didn't want to do the sale. I tried to slap it off on one of our staff here, and that wasn't going to work. And finally, it was just in the very, very early days of digital. Finally, I said, I got to come up with something. So I started looking at the images and realizing that there's a couple where most of the people look good, and the one, this little brat kid, there was one that he looked pleasant in. So I did my early efforts of cut and paste, and I built a master image. I phoned the client. I said, Mrs. Jones, and quite honestly, her comment to me was, oh, Donna, I was afraid you were going to call. We don't have anything, do we? I mean, I know little Billy or whatever his name was a brat that day. And I said, quite the contrary. There was one image that was amazing. It was just, he's not smiling, but he just looks very, very sweet and innocent. There was one image, and I kept repeating that one image that was so strong because I did not want to show her anything else because it would just been depressing and it would have undermined the potential of the sale. When she did come in, I projected that one image, and she never asked to see anything else. She just looked at it and went, oh my God, we look great. And I had done all the retouching. I tucked in Mom's hips, and I fixed the flyaway hair and the bags under the eyes. And I polished it so it was ready for printing, right like that. It was ready to go up, into the printing room. That taught me a powerful, powerful lesson. And today, we literally do it with all of our families. The people, the minor session I did last Saturday, they're coming in this Saturday, and we did 2 different compositions of the large family, the extended family. I'm only going to show 2 images. If they demand or ask to see others, I will show them to them. I'll make them available, but they won't ask because those 2 images, by the time that I finish today, they will be polished. I will have moved heads. I will have tucked in Mom's hips. I will fix the flyaway hair. I've done everything necessary to make it an amazing looking image. And what's so cool about this is when they see something that's that good right out of the box, they don't have any objections. They're not turning around and saying, oh, I don't like little Billy in this one, or I look fat, or my hair is out of whack. They have no objections for you to overcome. It just becomes an amazingly positive experience of talking about where to hang the portrait and how little Susie looks so sweet in this photograph. I just love her little dimples, and it's a fun way of selling portraits. If anybody here that's listening would like to have more information on this, the master image concept like that too, by all means contact me. I'm easy to find. Don MacGregor, just look a PPA search for that, you can find me, or Kevin can provide the information as well, and I'll be happy to handle a conversation with you. Okay, the value of a portrait. Ask yourself, what is the value of your portraits? What would you pay for a 20-inch or a 30-inch or a 40-inch image? What is the value artistically and emotionally to you? Those are key things that you must be really aware of and not undermine the respect that we have for our industry. We need to charge well for what we do, but we also have to provide a better product. Keep that in mind. It's not just a matter of raising your prices. That's a dangerous thing to do, to raise your prices into a high level. You've got to also artistically support that value emotionally with the stories that you put on the photographs, and of course your composition and design that goes into it. We clearly need to believe in the value of our portraits beyond the cost of the paper or the lab costs that go into it. Most photographers base their prices on lab prices. Labs only provide a minor service in that they provide us with that physical product. They don't provide that image with the artistic interpretation. We do. They don't provide the compositional elements. We do. That is what the client should be paying for. An 8x10 from a lab might only be $3, and a lot of photographers are charging like $30 to $50. That isn't enough. We need to charge enough to pay for the cost of our professional development, the cost of our staff, the cost of retouching, the cost of our marketing, the cost of our equipment upgrades and maintenance. We need to also include in our charges, cost for providing for our future, our families, our children, our holidays. That has to go into it. Don't look at the cost of a $3 8x10 or whatever the price is from a lab service such as Collages and assume that that's what you should base your price on. Charge what the market will bear, and keep in mind that, is the price too high or the purchasing desire not high enough? Don't also compare what you can afford with what people are willing to pay. That's really important. Most photographers also base their prices on what they themselves, their own comfort zone of what they can afford. There are people out there that have the ability to pay a great deal more. Without sounding arrogant or bragging or anything like that, I've got a session going through right now, a sale that I'll be working on today or a little bit more, that by the time the framing gets done will reach probably $20,000. I'm not trying to brag, and I'd love to say that this happens all the time. No, it doesn't. This is one of those rare numbers that get up there. But it's an amazing sale because we created portraits that they absolutely had to have in their homes. But we do have sales that enter into the $3,000 to $5,000 range on a very, very regular basis. That's our common average for our family work. There are people that can spend a lot more than I personally can afford to spend on this kind of a luxury item. Client vision. Our first and foremost concern is to make the client aware of what they can invest in. And there's two levels of that. One of them is the product, whether it be a beautiful gallery wrap canvas in a floater frame, or whether it be an album, like a day in the life album, which is a wonderful thing to do, as a full day in the life of a family, produced into an album. But also what they can invest in terms of the artistic vision. And whenever I do a client consultation, I'm talking about where we're going to make the photograph and the stories that we're going to tell, and I get very excited about it. A perfect example is I was doing a session a few years ago. Mom and I talked about doing this. It was a gift for Dad's birthday. We decided to go to the beach. Very sunny. And as she was leaving, she said, "Oh, Don, that's a silly idea." And I said, "What's a silly idea?" She said, "Well, my husband actually has two passions in his life. One is his children." I'm going, this is really good that his children are a passion in his life. And the other is his float plane. And I went, really, what do you mean his float plane? He said, "Well, my husband's a busy lawyer." Good thing to hear from the mother. I know that they can afford our services. And I said, he doesn't have a lot of time with the kids, but he loves taking this. He owns a float plane, and he loves taking the kids up camping and fishing up above Powell Lake and Harrison Lake, and they just have a wonderful time with their dad. It's just, they'll always remember that. And I'm going like, wow, duh, there's our story for this image. And I got all excited, and this client, and I talked about where the plane was moored, and I was using my hands as I was talking, saying, what if we had these kids walking up the ramp on the float plane dock, with their backpacks and the fishing poles, and then if we look over their heads, we could see the plane moored to the dock, and then maybe the river winding down in behind them. And we just got so excited about that vision that, the sale was done. It was an easy sale in the world to do. We've covered that with this slide in here too. Photographers, what is your perception of the artistic and financial value? I've been trying to make this point and driving it home for the last few minutes here because I really encourage you to understand and realize that the images that you create will have a significant impact on families. One of the things I would love to see photographers do is go out and have their own family portrait done and pay for it. Trade it off with somebody else and actually trade the cash back and forth. You'll start to appreciate the value of hanging something in your home. And the day that you do that, hang a 40 or 50-inch image of your family in your home is the day that you're going to be able to talk enthusiastically about the emotional value. Let's get into the artistic side of things now and talk about composition. This is my favorite stuff. Family first. Subject should dominate the portrait. Subject should not become part of the background. You want to bring the subjects into the foreground and let the background fall away. When we first started doing environmental portraiture a number of years ago, basically we'd see a pretty scene and plunk a family into a pretty scene. And over the years we've realized that it's great to see a beautiful scene, but it is the family that should dominate the image. Now, you folks are all artistically inclined. You've all got photographic training. Look at this image. This is my friend Diana Walker with her family down in the Walker River Ranch in Texas. And this is their backyard, actually, which is quite amazing. It's a strong photograph. This is a 50-inch image on their wall, which is great. But when you look at this, the first thing you do see is the family because they are in the foreground, even though there's a significant amount of space that lets your eye wander through the photograph. Now, what I want you all to do is in your mind, I want you to pick that family up, and I want you to move them deeper into the photograph on the left-hand side on that little bank of gravel and trees about in the middle of the frame. As you do that, those people are going to get smaller. And if you do it again on the right-hand side of the bank, further down the river, they're going to get smaller again. That's what I'm talking about here. You want to keep the people into the foreground, but have enough space to tell the story. By putting them further into the background of the image, you're going to lose the impact of them. They're going to become totally secondary, and the beautiful scene is going to become primary. Look at some additional images in here. The image on the upper left. The family is in the foreground down along the Fraser Arm. This is where I live here in Vancouver. They're dominantly in the foreground, yet there's a tremendous amount of space. You clearly and boldly see the family. The lower right-hand image was a rainy, pouring day that we actually worked outdoors. They had umbrellas over them, until the very last second, and then they just pitched the umbrellas. The kid on the left pitched his umbrella on the river, which is pretty funny. There's a lot of space in that image, but you still see them first. The image on the upper right, lots and lots of space, but you still see the family first and foremost. Now, I want you with your cropping guides, which in this case today is your hands, I want you to hold your hands up, and I want you to take the image on the upper left and just kind of make a little square with your thumb and your forefinger and just kind of crop it down into a traditional 8x10 composition. So really the family is all you see. It's still good, but it's not anywhere near as strong as the way you see it now with that additional space along the river. Composition of tightly packed images is the most common thing that people do today. Look at these two images in here. They're very salable. They're tight, but they're the 8x10 style of composition. They're okay. They're kind of boring, but they're okay. But this is what most people are doing. And if you think about it, when our clients take their 5D Mark IIs or their Rebel T, whatever it is, that's got the same megapixels as our main cameras, to their family reunions, this is what they do. They think this is portraiture. They pack all the people together in a tightly sardine style of thing and produce what we are producing. We have to move out of that. We absolutely have to. If we're going to command respect and get better compensation we have to get out of this style of composition. Additional styles of the same thing. Tightly packed compositions, it's something that they can do. Granted, it's far more refined than what they can do, but this is essentially what they are doing. Where I get excited is where we have space that has everybody showcased and we've got storytelling ability in the photograph. Look at these two images in the upper left. The people they're all individually represented. Nobody's hiding anybody else unless they're trying to hide weight issues. It's lots of space in the image. We can see the mountains in the background of Howe Sound and the Tantalus Mountains, yet the family is dominant. On the lower right-hand corner here, the family is repeating the design of those rocks, which is repeating the design of the mountains in the background. Everybody has their own individual representation in the photograph, Nobody is hidden or just a Where's Waldo head popping up behind two other heads. Everybody is showcased individually, and there's still lots of storytelling space. The same goes on in both of these images in here. The lower right-hand one, everybody is individually showcased. Nobody is hidden. And when I say this Where's Waldo thing, I see so many photographers, you're packing people tightly together, and you've got, for example, two members of the family standing side by side, and in behind them, with just their head being visible, is another family member. Well, if you're that other family member, you wouldn't be too happy with yourself because you're, for all practical, hidden in the photograph. Everybody needs to be individually represented with equal representation, unless you're trying to hide perhaps a weight issue. Both those images are good examples of that, and again, lots of storytelling space. Further examples of it. Look at the image on the left-hand side. The family's dominant in the foreground. They all have equal representation in the photograph. There's balance to the way they are represented. The same with the family on the right-hand side in their home. Two more examples down in here. The family in the upper left. This is in the Vancouver, what we call Cole Harbour, where I live here in Vancouver. Everybody's got equal representation in the photograph. There's space. They're not all sardine packed together. The image in the lower right, cropping I would refine the cropping, but I hung this in a client's home, but everybody's got equal representation in the photograph. Now let's talk briefly here about classic and relationship compositions. These are huge. Classic compositions essentially is a one-on-one rapport between the subject and the camera. Very traditional. Look at these images in here. One-on-one rapport between the subject and the camera. Very, very traditional. It's a great style portrait and needs to be done all the time. I love doing this kind of portraiture. One-on-one rapport between the subject and the family. One-on-one rapport between the subject and the camera, I should say. The relationship images, however, are extremely powerful. I used to see these styles of images over the years at print salons and competitions and go, that's very cool, that's very cool. But I realized I'd come back home here and all I would do is classic full-face views. And a couple of my staff members at the time, Don, did you do a relationship image? Oh no, the client wasn't interested. The problem was not the client at all. The problem was me. I did not believe at that time in my career that the clients would actually invest in interactive relationship images. I was the problem. The day that I started to do this style of image and actually started to sell this style of image, that's when I got really excited about doing them. And I swear to God that this type of an image people will invest in. It does require a little bit of pre-planning. You do have to pre-frame them about the value of it and get them excited about it, but they will invest in this style of portraiture. I mean, looking at these three images in here, these families are having fun together. The image in the upper left, they're laughing and talking, and the little guy on the left is teasing his dad and his mom, and they're just really having a wonderful time acting as a family. The image on the lower left, they're all involved in horses and rodeos, and they've all got their big belt buckles. This is their whole lifestyle, and again, they're just talking and interacting about the different things they're doing. It's a wonderful and believable story about the relationship of a family. The image in the upper left is actually the very first interactive image that I ever did, and it was just, my assistant that was with me said, Don, you always keep talking about doing these relationship type images. Let's do one. And I'm like, we only got a couple minutes left, and it's starting to snow, and it's getting dark out, and we just threw this whole thing together in their backyard, which was only like 15 feet wide. It's a tight, compacted image, but it was my first effort, and yet it was a home run. The family in the lower left do take their kids tobogganing. The kids love to build a snowman, and the grandma and grandpa help those kids build that snowman. So there's a story that's in there that was a very, very powerful story. The image on the lower right, this is an extremely good example. I first started this family talking towards me with the son talking to dad and the daughter talking to mom. Made a few images. Go back and do it again. And they kept starting to switch sides, so that the mother was talking to the son, dad was talking to the daughter. And when I showed them these images, the mother said, Don, you probably wouldn't know this, but in fact, my husband and my daughter are much closer than I am with my daughter, and vice versa with my son. That is how the family dynamics worked out. And I look over at mom just reaching over and touching her son, and he didn't flinch away. Most teens, if mom reach over and touch their son in public, would flinch away. He loved it. He's got a very powerful and strong relationship with his mother, and the family recognized that. Look at these images down here. This family in the lower side, they love taking the kids out for walks and share the joy of nature with them. The upper left image, they take their little one up swinging like this. This is in Yakima at the Ken Whitmer's Wall Portrait Conference. Just swinging and having fun, and the little girl just giggling and laughing because this is something they do as a family. And look how, when you look at that image, you see them first and foremost, and look how small they are in that whole image, how you look at those rolling hills in the Yakima Valley, which is their personal lifestyle. Look at the images down in here. The family on the left just walking and talking. She's a single mom. They're interacting. The image on the right-hand side, they've just got this brand new newborn. The little boy loves riding on Dad's shoulders, and they're just interacting with him. Very, very sweet stories. The image on the left-hand side, again, the swinging thing, the family actually do these kinds of things. They go down to the river. They play along there, and I just refined that story visually and compositionally so it has a powerful message is coming across it. The image on the right-hand side, the little girl is trying to show her dad how to dance. She's learning how to dance in or something to do with her school or something or other, and she's teach her dad, and she kept, Dad, you don't know how to do it. You got to do it this way. You got to do it this way. And the whole family is just giggling and laughing and enjoying the experience. The image on the center right, this family goes mountain bike riding in the Yakima Valley area. That's something they love to do together. They crash and bang through that. And as these kids get older, are they going to want to go with their parents? Not a chance. They're going to want to go out on their own. So this is an amazing time for with their kids. The image on the upper right is a photographer friend of mine from Houston, and they went on a vacation, first vacation in many years, and they took their children up here to Whistler to go skiing. And it was a great, great and special memory for them, and I made the family photograph for them, during that opportunity. It was just fabulous. Fall colors, walking and talking and interacting. Let's carry it on a little further and talk about some compositional elements. I'm just going to go through 3 or 4 of them quickly in here. Repetition of design and color are huge and powerful influences in a good image. Frames within frames, PowerPoints, and leading lines. Make a note of these in your notepad if you have that going. Repetition of design and color, frames within frames, PowerPoints, and leading lines. Repeating it one more time. Repetition of color and design, frames within frames, PowerPoints, and leading lines. Look at this image in here. Do you see PowerPoints, which is the rule of thirds? Yes, you do. Do you see leading lines? You bet we do. Do you see repetition of color and design? You bet we do. I want to encourage you to study photographs. The more that you actually study photographs, use those little references, repetition of color and design, frames within frames, PowerPoints, and leading lines. You analyze photographs and recognize those qualities in photographs. I guarantee, I absolutely guarantee that you will start to incorporate them in your photographs every day, and you won't even know you're doing it. Study photographs, analyze those photographs, and you will draw upon those experiences of analyzing and start to incorporate them into your images every day. Now let's look at an image like this in this terms of analyzing and recognize some of those things. Yes, there's repetition of design. Yes, there's repetition of color. Yes, there are arguably maybe a little bit of a frame that's going on there. But what also could I have done to improve the design of this image? What did I mess up here? Not badly, but what could have been done better? Look at the natural elements that's in this photograph. The stone rockery of the stairs starts on the left as a horizontal line, goes diagonal coming down in front of Dad and Mom, and then starts to extend horizontally again. And I'm repeating the people, the son, Dad, Mom, daughter, with that design. Yet why did I put the son, the little boy, in between Mom and daughter? It's a nice inverted triangle, but wouldn't it have been stronger to have him standing to the daughter's left, so it extended that design, that natural elements of the stone staircase extending out? That would have been better. Not a big deal, but it would have been better. Look at the lines that are in here. There's this beautiful diagonal line of the shoreline of the riprap coming along, and the people are in the lower right-hand PowerPoint. There's lots of space. There's individual representation. The family is repeating the design of all those jumbled rocks. Look what's happening in here in this image. The cliffside, this is exactly what it is, creates this beautiful diagonal line from upper right down to lower left, and I'm repeating the design of the family, upper right all the way down to lower left. Repetition of design. Repetition of design in here. They're walking, talking, but look at those beautiful S-curved lines of the grass or alfalfa or whatever they call that stuff in the photograph. It really leads your eye through the image. Let's talk about PowerPoints. PowerPoints are simply the golden rule, which is the rule of thirds, or Bacher's saddle, Gerhard Bacher fame. I'm just a simple person, so I like to think of it as PowerPoints. It is said in an English-speaking world that on visual images, your eye enters the image in the lower left, moves to the upper left, continues to the upper right, and settles on the lower right. That is how our eye moves to an image. And I believe that artisans and scholars of art that say this are saying something that is accurate and true. If you take your image visually and divide it into thirds, vertically and horizontally, those intersecting points are what I call PowerPoints. Now, the strongest position is said to be number 4. Please don't think that you have to use number 4 for everything like this. 1, 2, and 3 are also extremely powerful places to place your primary subjects. The other cool thing that if you embrace this concept, if you happen to be a person that is using these 8 by 10 really tightly composed images and everybody munched together, once you start to embrace this concept, your images will start to open up, and it's so much fun. I guarantee that if you use this rule of PowerPoints and start placing your families roughly on that PowerPoint position, your images are going to have more space, and they're going to be more exciting compositionally and artistically. Good examples in here, the upper right-hand image. You know, I blocked off part of it. That roadway leads your eye from left to right to settle on the family in the lower right-hand corner. That roadway is actually a leading line as well. The family in the lower left, they're in position number 1. You know, it's still a very powerful position. Lots of space. They're in the foreground. They are dominant. That example we looked at earlier, they're in the lower right PowerPoint. They're very, very dominant in the photograph. Your eye goes immediately to them because they're in the foreground, yet the rest of the story falls away. Another image you did at the Wall Portrait Conference of Ken Whitmer's daughter and her family, they're in the number 1 PowerPoint approximately. They are walking towards us. They're in the foreground. There's lots of storytelling space. PowerPoints are so much fun to work with. This family is roughly on PowerPoint number 4, not exactly, but more or less. There is still a tremendous amount of storytelling space that goes on behind this family. Up in Colorado at Breckenridge a few years ago, I was doing a workshop there. They're in the lower right-hand PowerPoint. You know, the story is, you know, the beautiful mountains, and actually it started to rain miserably as we were making this photograph. It was pretty funny. Everybody's scrambling for shelter. Lower right-hand PowerPoint. You know, starting to use these PowerPoints, 1, 2, 3, and 4, it'll force you to use more space in your photographs and to also embrace a lot of the other elements that in the background that can help evoke an emotion about a special place or an environment or different compositional lines. Frames to frame a subject are fun. Look at the image in the upper left. They are framed by those trees and also by the rockery behind them. The one in the center, they're framed by that doorway. The one in the upper right-hand corner, they're framed by those trees along the Guadalupe River in San Antonio. You know, that they hold and draw your eye to those people. Yet look how that family curves and flows with the tangle of roots and the tree trunk that goes up and behind them. Look at this image down here. This is actually a lot of fun. They're framed by the mast, by the stays, by the boat. That's kind of fun, and their boat ran as their lifestyle. But what's interesting with this image as well, just as a sidebar, is that little sailboat in the background is hugely important. If you squint your eye down, hold your thumb up, and just kind of take it away, put it back in, take it away, put it back in, take it away, put it back in, you're going to realize that that little sailboat in the background is an important contribution to the composition of this image. And all I did was I saw this sailboat coming around the dinner dock at the Royal Vancouver Yacht Club, and I figured, hey, it'd be cool to get it in the background. I had no idea at the time that it would have such a strong compositional contribution to the story. Let's look at leading lines. Lines can lead into or out of a primary subject, things like hard lines, trees, roads, that sort of thing. But lines can also be perceived lines like shadows or waves. They are real strong contributions. Look at these images down here. The upper right-hand image. Look at that little wooden retaining wall, I guess you'd call it, for that pond. There's a beautiful S-curve to it. There's a line that leads your eye through to that family. Look at the image in the upper left, the leading lines that are in there, and there's also the vertical repetition of the body with this, the people in the reflection in the foreground. The most important one to talk about this one here is the image in the lower left. The breakwater is a strong and powerful leading line, and you could argue that it leads your eye out of the photograph. You could argue that it leads your eye into the photograph and settles on the family. But here's the thing that you have to make a decision on yourself. I personally think that that breakwater leads your eye to that family. However, if you take your cropping guide and take your hand up and start to crop the top of the photograph off until, sprint down to one eye, until you're just touching the top of that breakwater, you know, not cutting Dad's head off, basically right below the yellow line from the photograph above it, and then squint down, look at it, then I think we have a problem. I think at that point in time it starts to lead your eye out of the photograph because it touches the edge of the frame. Look at this image in here in terms of leading lines. There's a sense of flow to this image from upper left to lower right. The family's repeating that design of flow from left to right. Analyze this composition, though, and think about that rock. What is the contribution of the rock, or is that rock a problem? So I want you to ask yourself, do you like the rock? Trust your feelings. Is the rock contributing to this photograph, or is it a negative? Is it an element that draws your eye away like a hotspot in the photograph? Well, I personally think the rock is important. I like the rock because I feel there's such a strong sense of flow from left to right that it comes down, hits and stops that rock because it's such a strong element, and helps you return to the story of the family walking along the river's edge. The image on the left, the leading line of the water flowing in towards that family. The image on the right-hand side, those logs lead your eye into that family and create this beautiful extension of your eye to wander through the rest of the image, which actually is quite a bit more of it on the left-hand side. Repetition of color and design are two strong contributions to good images. The simple one, repetition of color, we all can figure that out real easy by looking at this image. They're all coordinated in color and the background is coordinated as well. Same goes on with this one too, except it's a little more extended. The clothing, great contribution of repetition of color. Repetition of color of all the fall colors, which Dad actually gathered all those leaves and bags and we spread them all across the foreground. But I want you to look at one of the little contribution here too. Look at the shape of the rocks on the right and on the left, particularly on the right. They have that beautiful diagonal line flowing down from left to right. Look at the body language of all the people. Their three body languages are all very, very similar. That is not an accident. That is by design. Mom is in a seated Hogarth, daughter's in a seated Hogarth, and Dad is not in a Hogarth line, which I'm going to get to in a second, but it's repeating that same concept. Look at the diagonal line of their legs and their body language. That's powerful. Look at the design of this image in here. There's a flow from left to right along that riverbank. I brought the people along in a left to right flow to repeat that design. Look at this image here, the family in their home. There's a sense as you look at this home with that foreground area of the garden plantery stairs thing of diagonal lines leading up to and repeating the design of the roof of the building. I had to do that with the people who had to repeat that design. Look at this image down in here. They're in the lower right-hand PowerPoint. There's a sense of lines and repetition of color and design that go in here. The color obviously with the people, but the design, look how the texture and flow of the rocks seems to repeat how the people are in that photograph. A key point, be sure to balance colors of clients' clothing so you don't add weight to a part of the image. Look at this image right in here, which is a simple one. What could I have done to improve the color harmony of this image? It's a good image. It's nicely designed. I love how I've used the rocks that have this kind of diagonal flow to them to repeat the body language of the three daughters are sitting there. And as your eye moves from left to right, it stops when you hit mom and dad and kind of hold your eye to the family. But take it a step further. As you look at this image, the one single dominant color is the pink. And then we've got two burgundy kind of colors and two blue-gray coloring colors. This would have been a stronger image if had I picked the daughter in the center in the blue up, moved her over to the far left, and slid the other two girls down such that we had blue, burgundy, pink, burgundy, blue. Now you might say that's getting a little bit petty here, Don. I don't think so. I don't think it's petty at all. We are supposed to be professional photographers. We are supposed to understand color and design and composition. And the more that we study it, the more we'll recognize this kind of an issue and do it. Another perfect example here. I was doing this photograph along the north arm of the Fraser here, and they wanted a tugboat with a boom because we see those all the time in the river, but nothing that night. No boat traffic that night at all. Packed up my gear, we're leaving, and one of the boys said, hey, here comes a tug. So I threw this photograph together super fast. I didn't even change my settings on my camera, so film days. I put it together and I realized afterwards that, I could have kicked myself. I mean, the story of their backyard and the river and the boat is great, but this family now looks dysfunctional in this composition because the kid on the lower left does not belong to that family. He is not compositionally involved. Plus, there's no harmony to the colors and the tones in this photograph. What I should have done to improve this is taken the daughter, brought her down sitting similar to the son on the lower left-hand side in white, had the kid in white on the lower left, kneeling such that we had dark blue on either corner, and then a nice triangle built up between son, dad, and mom, all equidistant apart. That would have been a strong photograph. I'm going to start skipping through a couple other things here now because we're kind of heading to the end of our timing here. But I do want to get onto another issue here, so I'm just going to skip through some of this and get into some examples of how to do the design I'm talking about. I'll stop here for a second. Look at the repetition of design and elements in here. The background, the mountains flow from upper corners down in towards the center. Those rocks that they're sitting on flow from a high angle down into the center. I had to repeat that with the people. I had to have them repeating those designs in the photograph. In good portraiture, we want to find a three-dimensional feeling: foreground, middle ground, and background. Quickly looking at these images, we have foreground, we have middle ground, we have background. There's a sense of depth to the images. Foreground, middle ground, and background. There is a sense of depth to the image. Foreground, middle ground, and background. This is the image I did when we flew the kids up to the Harrison Lake area. Foreground, middle ground, and background. There's a strong sense of depth to the images. Foreground, middle ground, and background. People composition. You want your body language to be believable and honest. I want to encourage you to study magazines. Magazines, things like billboards, that is what clients see every day. That's what affects their perception of professional photography. What we need to do is to take that very, very free commercial fashion style of image making, use our skills as good portrait photographers, blend them together to create images that people are compelled to want to invest in. Study things. Hogarth's line of beauty is something I learned years ago. Essentially, it's the S-curve, the infamous old S-curve, which is just, well, examples. You can use this as a foundation to build groups, formal or casual, from the ground up. You don't have to go and buy a bunch of posing stools to work outdoors. I mean, we all add those things to our arsenal of tools over the years, but you don't need them right out of the box. This is what you need: Hogarth's line of beauty. Look at the image on the upper left. That's a perfect example of a seated, feminine Hogarth's line of beauty. It's casual, it's elegant. The image on the lower side, that's a reclining version of Hogarth's line of beauty. It's a nice, beautiful S-curve to her body language. Now look at this image in here. Look at the little boy and the little girl, particularly the little girl. Does that have that beautiful feminine look to it? No, she looks like a pretzel all munched up into the image. Look at the dad, strong, masculine form of Hogarth's line. Mom is in a reclining version and daughter's in a reclining version. And the boys are doing something that little boys might do. Look at mom and dad in here. Nice little curving S-curve. I should have, had I been on top of my game, extended mom's legs out even further so there's a better, elegant, feminine flow to her. Look in here, the two daughters. Very, very casual forms of it, but they're extending their bodies out. Mom is almost in the masculine version of it. Dad is kneeling, and they're all forming a nice, strong triangle. Look at mom and dad in here, a very perfect example, not the mistake I showed earlier, of flowing the bodies into one. Dad's in a strong masculine version of Hogarth's line, and mom is flowing and cupped, or spooned, if you will, that's a good way to look at it, spooning, into dad, but she's got that nice flowing S-curve. Hogarth can be masculine and feminine, and can be adapted in so many ways. One of my pet peeves in portraiture is horizon lines. Now, I am famous for screwing this up, but I want to encourage you to learn from my mistakes. You want to avoid cutting heads with horizon lines. You want to avoid dividing a photograph in half, and you want to try to use thirds. Look at the image in the upper left. We brought the family down into the lower third of the body line. The horizon line, the C, is not cutting through their heads. The same with the image on the right-hand side. The horizon line is not cutting the photograph in half. It's dividing the photograph into thirds. Look at this one, though, how I've used that horizon line to cut their heads in half. I should have had a ladder with me to drop their heads below that horizon line. It's not a big deal, but it's an important thing for we as professionals to recognize and try to avoid doing. Use natural elements to create a sense of depth in your photographs. Look at this image down in here. Literally, I used rope to tie those branches of those trees and draw them into the upper right-hand corner, into the lower left-hand corner, so there's a sense of depth. Without those trees, it would still be a nice photograph, but it would be kind of empty feeling. It wouldn't have a sense of depth to it. Family groups. I want to encourage you to build family units within the larger framework of a family group. A group of 10 is simply 10 groups of 1 linked together. A group of 20 is 20 groups of 1. A group of 40 is 40 groups of 1 linked together, and this is how you link it together. Number 1, look for natural lines in the photograph in the design and try to repeat the people in that pattern. So if you have a flowing compositional line from left to right of that rockery or that riverbank, use that to repeat the people in that pattern. Never have two heads side by side unless there's a head above or below to create a triangle. Never have two heads one above the other unless you have one to either side of it to create a horizontal triangle. Look for open space to add people. If you've got a person number 1 and then person number 2 right beside them 1 foot apart, and then you have a big gap to person number 3, not good. That looks like that's dysfunctional. The person doesn't belong. You need to add another person in between, so there's equal distance between each of the people in the photograph. Look for triangles and add people to form triangles. Also, learn to extend your groups horizontally. This is a huge, huge thing to remember. Extend your groups horizontally, not in the terms of depth in the image. When you do it in depth, where you have rows of people going backwards, the people that are further away from the camera are going to be smaller than the people in the front. That's not good. We're professionals. We want to have equal representation. You're also going to hide people if you extend it in terms of depth, row upon row upon row. Learn to extend your groups horizontally, and absolute key point, give everybody equal representation in the photograph unless you're hiding somebody with weight issues. Look at the images in here. Look at the natural design that's in the photograph in the upper right. I'm repeating the people of that. The image in the upper left, there's this beautiful rock face on the cliffside. I'm repeating the people of that, and the same with the image in the foreground. There's a nice bank along the pathway there, and I'm repeating the people flowing down that line. No two heads side by side unless you have one here to form a triangle. Allow approximately equidistant for all the people in the photograph. You want the heads roughly the same distance apart. You don't want to have two people tight together in that big gap, another one tight together, another big gap. Where to expand on a group like this? You're going to expand in ideas like this. Extending the group, extending the group, extending the group. Build your groups horizontally, not with depth. Look at a couple of examples. I could have done something with depth and brought a bunch of people in the foreground and had this, half the width of this, but then the people in the foreground would be much bigger than the people that would be sitting on the rocks in behind them. Artistically, this is a much stronger image because look at the way that the people are repeating all the jumble of the rocks in the foreground, and yet you see a similar sort of a pattern through the mountainscape in the background. And then if you're really smart, you run the horizon line through their heads. Remember to take a ladder with you. It just really does help a lot. Same example in here. We're extending the group horizontally, giving everybody equal representation. And if you look through here, I've used Hogarth's line of beauty in 3 or 4 of the occasions. Good examples of that in here. I'm starting to move fairly quickly because I want to get into another issue. Look at this image down here of my buddy Rocky and his family. I want you to add 5 people to this photograph using those rules. Extend the group horizontally, look for triangles, diagonal lines, form an extended group from here. And I'm going to walk you quickly through several examples of this as we wind our little workshop down. Where it should go is a pattern something like this. We don't want to just kind of munch them all up in around Rocky and his mom and dad. We want to extend the group horizontally, and we're forming triangles, we're forming diagonal lines, and everybody was equally represented. Everybody has equal distance approximately between their heads. If we had a dog and a couple of people in here, they might go in a place like this. In between brother and daughter, okay, there's an open gap. Between mom and daughter, there's a gap. Okay, there's open space that we could add a couple of people in there. We could put the dog down in beside dad at the edge of the photograph, although you do have to be careful when you do this style of composition with PowerPoints by adding too many strong elements close to the edge of a photograph. I'm going to skip over a couple more in here just really, really quickly. I think you're starting to get a sense of what's going on in this image. Added 4 people in here. They could go to something like this, although the one in the lower right is starting to get dangerous because it's to the edge of the photograph. Adding a couple more people into this image in here. There's open space between the girl and guy in white and gray, and there's open space between daughter and brother that we could add a couple of people into the photograph. Now there's a little stronger balance and the heads are equidistant apart. Add 4 people into this photograph. Look at the natural design that's going on here, how mom's in Hogarth, dad's in sort of a Hogarth with the kid on the knee, and by adding people, we could bring somebody sitting over on the log beside dad perhaps. There's space between mom and daughter. We could add something there. And look how we've extended the people on the right-hand side on a diagonal line and horizontally down the group. Same thing's going on here. You can see the open space now. I think you're getting a sense of what I'm driving at here with this business of open space and diagonal lines. This is where we could potentially add people. There's other options, but that's roughly where we could do it. Adding more people into this group, there you go. You know, we're getting a triangle starting from the lower right hand, coming up to the kid, down, up, down, up. Triangles, diagonal lines, and horizontal extension of the groups with everybody having equal separation or equal representation and equal head size. Extend the group in here. Obviously, it's got to go down on that nice little diagonal line to come up to daughter and extend it to mom and back down to son again. Adding people into here. This would be the pattern. Somebody, maybe a dog down on the lower right-hand side, and a nice diagonal line extending the group horizontally where there is more open space. Add 4 people into here. Boom. You know, we're repeating some of the lines that are in the dunes and the way we built the original part of the people. Add 3 people here. You could do something like this. Nice diagonal line extending down the right-hand side, but ooh, would you want to put a person up there? It does create a nice triangle between daughter and son, but now we've got that problem with the horizon line of the mountains, which I ran smartly through Dad's head, dummy. The better place for this would have been down here. That would be a better place to bring the extension to the group. Where next faces go, no brainer. On the right-hand side, too dangerous. You know, they'd have to come back into the center because that's weighting the photograph too strongly on the right-hand side. Add people into this group, boom, all the way down to the sides here. I sure hope you're getting a little bit of a sense of this, this style of things. We've used up our hour now, and I know that was our target, approximately an hour. So what I'd like to do is I just kind of slide through the rest of these slides here. Kevin, do we have any questions that people are asking or have asked over things over the last hour?
We do have a couple of good questions. Some of them are our preference. Like I'm getting a couple questions about your favorite lens to use for family portraiture.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I mean, okay. I don't know if you want to let one know.
Let's deal. You know, that's a good one to deal with that right now too. There is no favorite lens. You choose the lens based on the vision you have and the environment that you're in. If you are trying to work in an environment that you're really forced to be close to people, yet you want to show a lot more space, you're going to use a wide-angle lens. Conversely, if you're trying to draw a background or suck a background up to get a sense of feeling closer to you, you're going to use a longer focal length lens. Now, that's the blunt part of the statement. Having said that, I tend to use a longer focal length lens, like I shoot Canon. The 70-200 2.8 image stabilized lens is without question my lens of choice for 90% of my portraiture. I love how I can draw a lot of those background elements up, and part of that is the way that I see. I love looking at nature and looking at, there's that mountainscape, or look at that river that's winding off into that background, and that lens really helps me to control that. You also, when you're using a longer lens, you avoid a lot of the issue of foreshortening or distortion that often happens with your wide-angle lenses. I'm very, very reluctant to use a wider-angle lens, particularly on a family group or even on a person, because I don't like distorted people. I don't like seeing, for example, this photograph we're looking at. If I used a wide-angle lens on this photograph, the girl on the left-hand side, her legs would look ginormous, and Dad would look like a pimple in the background. So you really got to be careful if you're using a wide-angle lens. So you choose a lens for the given environment you're in. Having said that, I tend to use a longer focal length lens, even with my family groups. What other kind of questions are we seeing, Kevin?
What time of day do you normally shoot your portraits to avoid shadows on the faces? And then, kind of piggybacking on that, what type of equipment do you bring to cancel out any shadows that might be affecting the image?
Okay, lighting. That is a great question. And just for those of you that are listening, Kevin and I were talking earlier, we've scheduled a date, which is in early October, to cover this in depth. And they will, of course, be letting all you folks know when that's going to happen. And we'll be going through that in absolute detail. But to answer the question in the short form, the time of day is critical. There's 3 times a day that you can make good portraits outdoors. And I'm talking purely natural light here for the moment, not accessorized light. Morning, noon, and evening. If you have an overcast day, then you know what? It doesn't really matter. You can, photograph at any time. If you happen to have a sunny day, there's only 2 times a day that you effectively can do a really good job with natural light, and that's early in the morning or later in the evening. At this time of year now in Vancouver, it's starting to get pretty darn dark by about 7:30. So I want to be finished my session, or just, by that window of time. I'll start doing it around, 6:30. So I'm going to start to put the session together. I want to work at the tail end of the day, so that I can have that setting light that's creating these long, low shadows and sculpting my backgrounds. Morning can be very much the same kind of thing. In terms of additional equipment that we will use, when we are forced to use other equipment, which we regularly are, reflectors are my first choice. I think reflectors are an amazingly powerful tool because you see exactly what you get. Okay, what you see is what you get with reflectors. Reflectors, however, are much harder to utilize effectively with larger groups, so you're forced to rely on electronic flash. For years, I used to take out my portable softbox, all sorts of equipment. You have to have an extra assistant to do electronic flash work outdoors. But lately, quite honestly, I've been just using the Canon flash guns, or your little Nikon flash guns, your 580s or whatever the Nikon version of it is. They have turned out to be a really, really powerful tool if they're used effectively, knowing how to use the penumbra of the light. And I'll get into that in that other workshop down the road here a little bit. But I will take those items out. So my 70-200 on my 5D Mark II or my Mark III, and one or two of the little Canon flash guns if I'm forced to use them. Now the key with that though is you are going to be using those on stands with a radio control unit. If you're going to do environmental portraiture and you're going to use electronic light, you realistically have to have radio control units. There's 2 or 3 brands out there that are very effective. There's the Pocket Wizards, which I use quite aggressively around here, or have used them for the years aggressively, and they have the new versions of them which are dedicated to Nikon and Canon cameras and flash guns. I will admit that I've had problems with them over the years. There's the not Pocket Wizards, but the radio poppers. I have not used them. I've heard some really good things about them. But what I honestly use today, Scott Robert Lim is a photographer from California who is a very, very exciting photographer, and being Chinese, he has been over there and he's brought back his version of radio control units, which are totally manual, completely manual, and they are extremely effective. I have yet to have them fail triggering my units unless the batteries are dead. They're good, and they're really, really reasonably priced. If you go to scottrobert.com or Scott Robert Gallery, just Google Scott Robert Lim. You can search those out on the internet. But the neat part about it is a transmitter and 3 receivers is $200. That's, you cannot get in any of the unit for that kind of money. If you're looking for something that is all this TTL business, then you're going to have to go to the dedicated units through Pocket Wizard. I personally like to use them manually. I feel I've got far more control, and those little units are just great. What other kind of questions are we seeing?
I got a couple questions about the Hogarth design, and maybe explain that in a little more detail. I'm not sure if that's something that you want to get into, or if we...
Yeah, it's something that, how do I explain it in simple terms? Hogarth's line is essentially a line defined by an artist back around 1800 or 1700 or something, and it's an S-curve. And where it's powerful, and I'm just going to skip out here and go backwards to right there. Okay. If you look at the photograph on the image on the upper left, if you take your finger and just draw it to the center of her body from the top left-hand part of her hair as we visually look at it to the bottom, we've got a nice little S-curve line. The same can be said with the girl on the lower hand side. This is a nice little S-curve line, and that's where that whole concept comes together. I think for the people that are, if there's somebody that's interested in doing that, I think what I'd like to do is have them contact me directly if they're not grasping the way it's presented right here. And you can do that just by contacting me at Don at MacGregor Studios, MacGregorStudios.com, and I'll set up a little Skype thing and show some other images with that. You can also get me at MacGregor, MacGregor, MacGregor at PPA.com, and I'd be happy for anybody, if they're interested in following it through, to put a little more time together. What I would do is I put together a series of slides that define it a little bit more. I think that might be a better way of those people if this isn't sufficient enough for them.
Okay,
what else
so
do we see there, Kevin?
That'll work. That'll work. That's actually, that the rest of the questions are more of personal preferences on what you prefer when going out. So I do ask that any of those questions everyone has, if you could just you can email Don, and he'll be carbon copied on the follow-up email I send out later for this webinar. And then also for everyone that's asking, this webinar will be available for download early next week after we can process and render it and then get it up on the blog for you. But that is, I'm gonna end the Q&A session right there, because I know that there's a lot of questions that they're more personal preference, and I think they'd be best answered through email. So
I'm going to cut you off there, Kevin, and just say I want to thank everybody for spending an hour and a bit with me too. I really enjoyed doing it. I hope I've been helpful, and I want to thank Collages for their support of professional development. I think that's just awesome what you guys are doing.
All right, thank you. Well, I mean, hey, thank you so much. We and everyone that is thanking Don. I'm not sure if you can see all the comments, but we're getting a lot of thank yous for a great webinar.